If you are the nominee, as she suggested over there, we're going to have to pull out all the stops. Our 21-year-old son said the other night, I wonder if Joe Biden would consider choosing a Republican as a running mate.
The answer is I would, but I can't think of one now. No. Look, here, no, I'm serious. No, here's what I mean. Let me explain that. You know, there's some really decent Republicans that are out there still. But here's the problem right now of the well-known ones. They've got to step up. Do you know what I mean? I'm not being a wise guy, but there are a lot of people. And by the way, it's presumptuous of me. I'm going to get clobbered by the press. Biden's talking about vice presidential candidates. He doesn't have the nomination, which is totally legitimate, okay? But there are an awful lot of people out there who are qualified to be the only thing I know about is the qualifications for vice president. And by that I mean no president can, by him or herself, handle the job all themselves any longer. It's too big. And so one of the things that I worked out with, we worked out, Barack and I, is that when he gave me responsibility, he gave me total presidential authority. I could hire people, I could fire people, I could pick anyone from administration to work with me. I had complete control, not a joke. And the reason he was confident in doing that is, first of all, nobody wondered whether or not he couldn't do it. That's because it's a hard thing for a person to give somebody significant responsibility, like doing the Recovery Act, for example. It's $900 billion, and then it pointed out that less than 0.2% fraud or waste occurred, and that person gets a lot of credit, in this case me. Well, it takes a president to be able to
pause it for 1 second. I'm not going to let that slide. First of all, it was closer to $800 billion in the Recovery Act, 2/3 of which were tax cuts. I don't know what kind of fraud and waste you're going to get in the tax cuts. But remember Mr. Train Joe? Has anybody seen all the new high-speed trains that we have that came out of the Recovery Act? Because I haven't. Now, I think it's wrong that he gets that everybody gives him credit for it. That's the first I've heard of it. But if he wants the credit for all those shovel-ready jobs that didn't happen, you can have it. If he wants the credit for the fact that that was about $500 billion short from what we needed, that we had a protracted recovery, that we had immiseration in terms of the housing sector, that in fact it was so bad that we elected Donald Trump. And even if you want to say it shouldn't have been that, like it was a half a dozen other things. It shouldn't have been that close. The reason why it was that close was because of the failures of what this guy wants credit for. But go ahead.
And that person gets a lot of credit, in this case me. Well, it takes a president to be able to say, have the confidence that that's not going to diminish them in any way. And secondly, it requires you to be simpatico with your vice president. Not just like them, not just trust them, but make sure they're in the same exact wavelength politically.
Now, I want to know what Republican is in the same exact wavelength of Joe Biden. Like, how is that even possible? That's the problem with that statement. It's that Joe Biden does not see himself as fundamentally different from a quality Republican. That's the problem with that statement. Not that he's completely has a tin ear as to what the lay of the land is. That is problematic. Tin ear as to what the politics of that comment is. A tin ear as to the efficacy of the Recovery Act. Now, yes, I think it did stop us from descending into a genuine depression. But there's no economist now who doesn't say look, it was insufficient. And there were plenty at the time who were saying it was insufficient. Paul Krugman was writing on the Times. It wasn't like this was all in the back pages of the Baffler magazine. But in the end, now you could say, well, he was rambling. He had no idea where he was. And so he sort of like looped around because he was trying to, at one point, like he was trying to make it like, well, Obama trusted me so much that he gave me all the work. So he knew I was competent. But the other thing is we're very simpatico in terms of our politics. That's what you need for a vice president. So yes, I would appoint a Republican. I can't name a specific one. But what generic, theoretical, hypothetical Republican exists that Joe Biden feels so close to? That's what should worry you about this moment. Because Joe Biden, in his mind, is a Republican from 1993. And I would remind you that it was Republican politics in 1993 that led to the politics of today. Things like austerity, things like cutting Social Security, things like cutting Medicare, things like rolling back regulations on the EPA, things like the idea that government's too big, that government's too clumsy, that government can't do anything. Things like tax cuts are always the answer. Things like wealth inequality is not that big of a deal. That's the problem with Joe Biden. It's not that he would consider a Republican or even that he would use that rhetoric. It's that he perceives himself as being politically simpatico. Is that what he said? Is that the words he used at the end? With a hypothetical Republican. Well, I want to know who is this hypothetical Republican that we as Democratic voters would be happy with as our first choice, as our nominee. That's the problem with Joe Biden's comments. That's the real problem with Joe Biden's, I'd pick a Republican VP, or I'd be willing to.